Welcome back, faithful listeners. Messed up there for whatever reason. To the Media Files podcast. Again, you are hearing me solo. We just recently dropped another episode. So we're trying to do it a lot more frequently. The whole point of the idea is that we are able to keep the uploads consistent, because I fear that, again, consistency, as I said in the other solo episode, is very, very important. So on the three of us, each of us will try to do solo episodes every now and then, just to kind of keep things going. Because again, the biggest and hardest thing, as you know, as an adult, is just trying to meet up. That's the hardest thing for us to do. So I wanted to hop on here really quick. And like I said, with the other two, they can, if they have an idea or a topic they want to talk about, they can just hop on and get it done. And then, we'll upload it for you guys to enjoy. I think it is also important to get perspectives from each, us together. We're able to kind of, lay our ideas on the table and bounce them off of each other. But the most important thing is that we're individual people at the end of the day. Just like you and me, we're all individuals. We all have our own thoughts, opinions, and feelings about things. So today I wanted to kind of touch on a subject. I was looking up topics for maybe upcoming episodes or whatever, and I came across this. Now, we can talk about this as a group. And the other guys will have their own opinions as well. But I wanted to kind of touch on this. As you can see on the screen, it says, does fan service do more harm? Does fan service do more harm than good to a series? Now I'm going to take that off. Yeah. And leave that up. Yeah, that's a beautiful background. Wallpaper engine, people. It saves lives. Does fan service do more harm than good for a series? Now, as an avid reader and enjoyer of anime, manga, manhwas, whatever you want to call it, I feel that there is a fine line between acceptable fan service and just over-the-top fan service. For example, there is an anime, a very old manga, kind of the retro style drawing and whatnot, called Kenichi, the Mightiest Disciple. And I've never heard of it, but it's on Hulu. It's on Hulu for you to watch and enjoy. And I feel like for a show like that, where the focus is more on martial arts, I feel like fan service defeats the purpose. And where do we get the idea that every single anime needs to have this perverted old man or person who's oh, I'm so into women so much that I can't control myself, and is literally on the borderline, over the line of sexual harassment? Where did that come from? Anywho, the point of the matter is, I feel like the show would do better without it. And you can line up a whole bunch of shows where this is kind of true. Another show that I remember is also on Hulu. I think it's still on Hulu, called Buso Rinkin. I think that's how you say it. It's another kind of retro style anime manga series that I found on Hulu. And the thing I loved about that show was the fact that it goes contrary to what's so popular today. Going through anime and manga, there's always this woman or girl who's old enough, but she has the full figure of an adult woman, in the chest, in the butt, in the thighs. All of that is appealing to the audience. But yet, that adds nothing to the series whatsoever. I heard of an anime where I think it's called Peter Grills or something. I watched some of the episodes and I'm like, this is the dumbest show I've ever seen in my life. And I get it. A lot of times it's more for that shock factor or whatever. But when are we going to get away from the idea that that has to exist in every iteration? fan service does not necessarily equate to people loving it. Now, if your fan service comes at the price of your anime having a good story, then okay, sure. I think a good example is Auri Ferretta from Commonplace to the World's Strongest. I found this unfortunately on Hulu. I found a lot of my anime on Hulu for whatever reason. But it has a lot of those fan service type of moments. Again, I feel like whenever we come to a series or something, there's the idea that we're trying to project ourselves onto the main character in some way, shape, or form. And I say that for myself because there's certain series I just can't get into. And again, it's not necessarily that it's a bad series, but I find it hard to create that connection between me. Like, okay, in our last episode or however many episodes we've talked about Dragon Ball Z, I love Dragon Ball. I love Dragon Ball Z. And a lot of that is because it's literally just like for men, like chiseled bodies, like literal just over like chads, just the alpha male, the prime example of what a man can be. Just muscled out, going at their fullest to protect what they love and destroy their enemies. The same could be said for JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. And I've said this before, and I've said it with others that I know of. It is a series made for men. I find a lot of like female listeners or people that I know who will say, I just didn't like it. And they'll say the same thing about Dragon Ball Z, and that's fine. Because we have to understand, just like with video games, any form of media, it is made for an audience. Whenever I write a book, whenever I write a fan fiction or whatever, I am writing it with the intention of it being read by a specific demographic. You cannot, hear me out, viewers, you as a creator, you as an artist cannot make something that everybody can enjoy. It is impossible. It is impossible. Like even Disney classics, people are going to find like problems with those. They're the most wholesome things you could probably find. I mean, Disney now, everyone has a problem with it, but I digress. The point is that not everything is good. Whenever we think of fan service, let's just lay it out on the table. When I see fan service, I'm like, okay, this is made for teenagers. This is made for those people who cannot differentiate between like, I'm not saying fan service is bad. I think when it is overused, when it is literally the only thing that is permeating every single page or every single major scene, like if it shows up in a scene that it does not need to, it's kind of like, but why? Like, and I guess the whole idea of fan service is debatable. Like some people can say, oh, fan service is, just a wink wink to like something that happened in an old series or like paying homage to another series. When I say fan service, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking about sexual content in some way, shape, or form. That is what I am specifically talking about here. And what that article is talking about. It might have, mentioned the other parts too. But when they say fan service and I see Rosario Vampire or whatever it is, you know what they're talking about. It's like High School of the Dead. Like, it is this close to just being a porno. There's no difference. There's literally the only difference is they're wearing clothes. I'm just being honest here. But again, I'm not saying that shouldn't be in anime, I shouldn't be in series, but the point is, I feel like there needs to be an understanding of why would you include this into your series? Does it enhance it? I don't think so. I don't think throwing something like that into a series does not make it better. Because if you use that as, let's say, as a tool, Does that mean your story sucks? It could, because I feel like there is a balance to it. But if that's all that you are showing and doing, and it permeates your series to a degree, that is all that you are like literally like talking about. Hold on, let's pull that let's pull that article back up here and see what we got. Whenever a person watches an anime with a harem included, fan service is almost guaranteed. Audiences can't watch romantic comedies such as Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs and Hinsuki for more than 5 minutes without lewd scenes. Constant sensuality in a series may attract some audiences, yet others feel is used as a crutch to help mediocre anime. When fan service is essential to an anime's plot, like Yamada's First Time, B gotta whatever, it's warranted. However, when there's a series about a good that has a good story yet chooses to incorporate every ecchi ever chance they can, many feel like it ruins the series' potential, making it trashy. Okay. I wanted to read that just so I didn't like miss the point. Again, it's more so of the idea that what we're talking about here is ecchi. Another thing too, I don't understand why harem animes. A lot of times, and those have been really popular for whatever reason. But a lot of times when it's like, okay, a whole bunch, and I think is understandable. I think there is a fascination. I think we can all see it in our day-to-day lives where there's this person and all people, or like there's this massive group of people who are just in love with them, almost to the point of obsession. And I think a good example of that is like in Naruto, early Sasuke, where it's like, oh, he's the cool kid of the class. He's so brooding. He's so alone. I don't know when that became something so attractive, but it's like all the girls in the class are, in love with him, and all the dudes are jealous because he gets all the attention, but he doesn't do anything with that attention. So my whole thing with harem is like, okay, it's believable if it is written right. Like there's some where it's like the guy just shows up, says a few words, and it's like, yes, I gotta marry this man. And I'm like, that makes absolutely no, like, how is this romance? How is this romantic? This doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times it is bad writing. Like I think what they're saying is true. When it comes to harems, it is like a staple that there has to be ecchi in it. But if it's in there every 2 minutes, literally just every 2 minutes, I can't sit there and watch that. Because again, the point is to be able to enjoy a show. I think there's a big strike against anime. And a lot of times people will say that there's this problem with anime because of ecchi being one of those reasons. It's like, okay, for instance, Food Wars. My first time watching Food Wars, I didn't know what I was getting into. I just watched it because I was like, oh, okay, it's an anime about food. Okay, how, it could be pretty good. I've never read it. I've never watched it. And watching the first episode, I'm like, huh? I watched the whole thing because it's an interesting anime. Like, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of, it's like very informative. They even have like in the like manga where you can make some of the recipes from the actual show. Like they'll give you the recipes and how to do it and everything. I think that's pretty cool. Do I feel that the ecchi component, adds to Food Wars? I think it's balanced enough because it happens to everyone. I think the problem that a lot of us have, and especially for me, is that it exclusively just happens to like a few people. It happens to whoever tastes the food, and it's like, like. But again, someone who's like brand new into it and doesn't understand, or is like, whoa, what is this? They can get turned off pretty quickly because it's like, okay, this is just porn. And I mean, I've seen that happen. I've had a few people like, yo, what is this? And that's understandable because you think it's an anime about food. It is about food, but it's about how people respond to that food. So it can enhance it, but I also don't feel like, I mean, okay, I think it's kind of the same with JoJo. JoJo is over the top for a reason, and it enhances the story so much. And I think the over the top moments also kind of escalate the series as well. I mean, it is food. It's food, people. Like, I don't think you're going to describe how your pizza tastes in a 20-page, like, demographic. I mean, biography or whatever. A 20-page essay about how good this one slice of Domino's pizza is. You're not going to do it. You're just going to say, that's pretty good. Or you're going to say, ugh, that's trash. Like, there's not a lot of vocabulary needed to describe how good or bad something is. So they do it through the visual style and through the words that accompany it. So I think it helps it, but I think it also kind of So I feel like there are a lot of series that we can kind of point to that either, do this well or do it wrong. And I think a lot of series nowadays are doing it the wrong way. For example, I kind of like search through, for new manga, new series by new authors and everything. And what turns me off the most, and I'm saying this just in all honesty, again, this is my opinion. All this is my opinion. You can either agree, disagree, whatever. I'm just speaking my opinion because I have the mic, I have the software, I'm doing the editing, I'm doing all of this, and I'm posting it, and you can either listen to it or not. But whenever I see an overly sexualized cover, I turn away. Because I'm like, okay, that's the focal point of the series. I don't need to know anymore. And again, it is not a bad thing. But if that is literally what your series rides on, I just can't get into it. And I say this specifically. Compare your favorite anime or manga. Let's say Jujutsu Kaisen. Pick a random book, manga cover and compare it to something of an ecchi comedy or whatever. And there's a stark difference because the focal point is different. Like, does Jujutsu Kaisen not include some sexual like references or like visuals? It can, but it doesn't ruin the overall like story. It doesn't like mess it up. So I do kind of feel like fan service, appealing to your fans in the most lewd way possible, like seems like a cop out to me. Because it's like, instead of focusing on a good story and making good characters, you're going to opt out and just make overly sexualized characters, because it's almost like the idea of anybody will watch anything as long as it's stimulating. And I think that is a terrible way to view anything and everything. Because I also feel like, this is just me, I feel like if that is overly used in an anime, that means they don't care about their characters, they don't care about the plot, and they don't care about progression. Because you can write a good story without it. Like, I'm racking my brain thinking of the number of times like something like overly sexualized has happened in the Dragon Ball series. Don't get me wrong, there are references. They literally have Master Roshi in there. But it doesn't happen every episode. That's the thing. Like, if it happens every single episode, or as soon as you introduce like this character, it's like there was this one anime that I watched and I couldn't finish it, where basically this guy is like, he has access to this secret dungeon or whatever. He becomes OP in the beginning, but he has the ability, I think, to create whatever skill or whatever he wants. But in order to do that, he like gets a really bad headache or something afterwards, and he has to get life points. And one way to get life points is to make out with a girl. And then there's this childhood friend who's like obsessed with him. So they just make out. And it's like, but that is the dumbest plot. That is like the dumbest story I've ever heard. Like, that is like a teen. No offense to teenagers, but that's like someone who's like a middle schooler who just learned about what kissing is and is like, you know what? I'm going to write a story. Again, no offense to anyone of any age or whatever. I feel like I shouldn't even have to say that. You obviously understand what I mean when I say that. But what I'm saying is that level of competency, literacy, that level of just being able to write a competent plot is lost. And I sat there thinking, why did this get an anime? Out of all the animes we're getting, why did this series get an anime? Because I'm sitting over here in my own camp thinking, why do we need a One Piece remake? They'll say, oh, it's for the new fans to get into One Piece. Listen, I've been with One Piece since it started. If you're not in it now, then it sucks to suck. One Piece is a long commitment. Like, it is like being married to a series. Like, I've been with this series all this life, and then everybody just gets a cheap, a quote unquote better knockoff or better retelling of the story. It looks better, smells better. It's like plastic surgery just brought this up. And it's like, people aren't focusing on the real issue here. Why are we wasting our resources on something that's already been established? Bring out new series. Remake old ones that have not been seen for years. Remake Big O. Remake Zatch Bell. Why is this anime that literally just has this one kid making out with a whole bunch of women to alleviate his headaches? Why does that get the green light when we have 1,000 other competent, talented mangakas working on really good projects and they opt out for that? I don't get it. And I do like romance. I think that is one of my top genres. Not like overly into it, but like if it's a good one, I will watch it. Like Toradora, I watch that every Christmas. Like every year I watch it because it's that good. It doesn't need the ecchi. It doesn't need that. But if you added in every single episode every 2 minutes, I would be turned off. It's just like High School of the Dead. I stopped watching and reading that because that's all it is about. It's like, it's less about survival in the zombie apocalypse and more on how many times can this woman's breast jiggle within the span of this episode. How many panty shots can we get within the span of this episode? I hate that. I hate that so much because it does not make sense to me. How are you going to sit there and tell me that this equates to a good story? And again, people will say, oh, it doesn't hurt it. It doesn't do anything bad. I mean, to a certain extent, no. But if it dominates the series, if it dominates the animation, for instance, if they do a zoom in panty shot or whatever, and that looks better than 90% of the show, you got a problem. Yeah. But anywho, I digress. I think again that is just a testament to a bigger problem where we focus on these tropes and expect the tropes to carry over into character development. One character trope I do not understand and I do not like are lollies. I do not understand that. There's one show or like one series I'm reading where it's like, okay, the person is like over 300 years old, but has the body of a underdeveloped like 12-year-old or something. And I'm sitting here, thinking to myself, but why? Because if I here's the issue, listeners. If I showed you that picture and I said this grown man, well, okay, this person, like the young girl, just looking at her, is in love with this guy and is trying to marry him. They have sexual scenes and all this other stuff. Most people would get weirded out because they're like, huh? Like, what? That's disgusting. Based off of the image alone. You get what I'm putting down here? It's almost like those videos where you like show different episodes or like different segments from like a popular cartoon or whatever, and it's like, oh, the amazing world of Gumball without context. Because what they say is pretty wild without the context. The same thing with lollies. You say this young girl is obsessed and trying to literally like do it with this guy who's like 30, 40 years old. You show the picture of her and you show the picture of him, and there's a clear age difference. Based on the picture between the two, your reaction is going to be different. Versus, I tell you, oh, this young girl is actually a 300-year-old elf. You still might be like, but okay. Like, there's that questionable gray area. And I think that's really important in this idea with fan service. There's that gray area. Either it's too much, and I'm never going to say it's not enough. That is never on the spectrum. The spectrum is tolerable or just absolutely crazy. Those are the only two options you have when it comes to ecchi. Either it's tolerable or it's just overboard. I'm just being honest, listeners. Like, bring up that lolly debate. Show why it is that if I show this picture of this person and I show of the other person, why are you going to have a different reaction or just a regular person? Because the whole point of manga and anime is that, quote unquote, anybody can get into it. I don't think that's the case. There's a reason why there are different categories and genres of manga, just like there are of music and everything else. You have your action adventure manga for your thrill-seeking love, you have romance for those, romantics at heart. You have sci-fi, you have supernatural, you have sports. Sports. I don't like sports. I don't like sports anime. I don't get it, to be honest with you. Now, okay, I don't want to be unfair and act like, oh, I don't watch anything that's like, I've seen a lot of shows to where I'm like, okay, this is too much. There is one show that I've watched, or in a manga too that I've read all the way through, that I think is actually pretty decent. I feel like the ecchi content is a little bit too much, and I feel like the harem is like, sure. But it's called You Never Learn. And basically it's about this kid, and he's like really smart, but his family's like dirt poor. So he's focused on his education so he can get a good job and help take care of his family. But at the same time, he is like, kind of antisocial. Like, so he wants to be able to go to a school, but he knows they'll never afford it. And it's just his mother, his dad passed away, but he has like 3 younger siblings. And the sister is madly in love with her brother. I'm so sick and tired of that trope too. Anywho, in order to get the scholarship to go to the school that he, really wants to get into, the principal wants him to tutor 2 of the school's geniuses in the subject that they want to focus on. One of them is really good in the literary arts, and the other one is very good in mathematics. However, the one who wants to master, or the one who's good in literary arts, wants to be good in math, and then the other person who's good in math wants to be good in literature. So it's like the flip-flop, and basically they suck to the point of where it is affecting their grades. And throughout the whole series is literally this guy who goes above. It's almost like he's a natural born teacher. He goes above and beyond for these girls. No matter what, he will do everything he can to help them reach their goals. And a few more people kind of join the fray. And I think in total there are 1, 2, 3. I think it's 4. Yeah, I think it's just 4. One of them is like an older woman who's a teacher. That's weird, but sure, whatever. Listen, if you're okay with lollies, then you're okay with this. But anywho, or if you justify lollies, then you can justify that. I still think that's weird. I did not approve of that, but whatever. Again, it's kind of one of those anime where I'm like, or mangas where it's like, okay, sure, whatever. And the one thing I think horror anime series, whatever, does really poorly is kind of tie up those loose ends. Like, it does not cater very well to the audience. And I say that because in reality, we know that the main character cannot, in all good conscience, be with all the women that he's shacking up with. We know that literally cannot happen. We know that the character cannot have a meaningful relationship with every single woman. But this manga does something interesting. So in the manga, it doesn't do it in the anime because the anime ends, I think, after season 2 or whatever. But basically what they do is that there's an offshoot. So at the end, there are 4 endings. Each one gets its own time. So each one is what would happen if the character got together with this person. In other words, it fulfills the desire of every single person. It's almost like back in the day when there was, again, we'll use Sasuke as an example. You had people who, I don't know, for whatever reason, rooted for Sakura. You may have had people who rooted for Ino. You had people who were rooting for, I don't know, what other girls there were in his classroom or whatever. But the idea was that there were people who were going to be dissatisfied no matter what. Because at the end of the day, he got together with Sakura, sure, whatever. We don't know why. We don't know what's going on. Whatever type of genjutsu she used on him. He had a kid and bounced. So I think that's good storytelling within itself. But I digress. The point of the matter is, no matter who he got with, there were going to be fans who were disappointed. And I think that's fine. I think the same thing could be said for any other series. Like, for instance, Ichigo in Bleach. There are people who are like, Ichigo needs to get together with Rukia. Okay, that makes sense. They literally have an entire arc where Ichigo goes against the status quo just to save Rukia from her own death. But then you have people who are like, I'm team Orihime. Okay, child, kind of like a friend from school who's like very perky, outgoing, and someone he needs to protect. Cool. And then you have Orihime's friend who's like a tomboy, but you're like, okay, I could see it. They're like really close friends. Ichigo kind of, thinks highly of her. Sure, whatever. I think a lot of people were leaning more towards Rukia because this man literally spends all the time with her. She literally was living in the man's closet. That's weird. Anywho, I digress. The whole idea was no matter who he ended up with, there were going to be fans who were disappointed and who would not like him. Ultimately, he ended up with Orihime, which, in my opinion, did kind of feel like out of nowhere. But again, he did spend the second arc trying to rescue her. So I guess, sure, whatever. And Rukia did end up with Renji, so sure, whatever. So it kind of defies the expectations of the audience. Like, okay, who is he going to end up with? There's always this debate. Like, who is the main character going to end up with? I think Black Clover is another good example where it's like, okay, Asta has all these potential waifus. A lot of people are like, oh, it's Noelle. Other people's like, it's Nero. And it's like, I mean, it could be anybody. But a lot of people, I think we all know it's going to be Noelle. She's the first female protagonist introduced into the series that actually has develops a genuine relationship with him. We can't use Sister Lily because she's of the faith and can't marry anyway. That's not how, even though Asuka's like, I'll use all my manpower or whatever to make it happen. And we know that's not how that works. But anyway, I think the way You Never Learn handles that ending, it is done very well. It is done very well because it gives each character or each person who was shipping this person a chance to feel fulfilled. Because when it comes to harem, I think the biggest thing with romance animes is fulfillment. I.e., does the main character get with someone who, A, deserves them, B, who they will also take care of and cherish, and who also, will take care and cherish them. Like, not saying that it couldn't have happened with Ichigo and Rukia, but technically Rukia isn't even technically alive. She's a soul reaper. So I don't know how that would have worked. Like that's weird. But it gives that fulfillment. Like, okay, if the story went like this, it's 5 of them. I just remember the other one. It was the 2 geniuses. There was one girl who's like very athletic, but she sucks in everything, so he tutors her. There's an older student who graduated like a year before them, and she's like living her own life, trying to be a doctor. And then there's the sensei. So there's five of them. I can't believe it took me that long to remember. But it gives each of them their own storyline to where it's like, okay, this is what would have happened if he chose this person. That is fantastic. That is great writing. But you get in harem animes for the most part, yeah, I don't know who I'm going to pick. All these girls literally just want to bang me for absolutely no reason. And maybe it's for a good reason. I don't know. But a lot of times I feel like, are these just written by men? Because I don't think they understand how relationships work. Like, I feel like it's more fan service in harems than it is about the actual story and character development. Like in You Never Learn, each character kind of grows in their own way, discovering who they are and what they can do. And a lot of that is thanks to the main character. It's not this superficial, he gets so overpowered that he literally saves her and now she just wants him no matter what. And it's like, okay, but you didn't spend any time with him. You don't even know his last name, bro. Like, calm down. So, yeah, I'm kind of in that boat of there's a good way to handle it and there's a bad way to handle it. And I think even more so with how series are handled and how things are written, it is very, very important to keep in mind that a good story cannot be saved with tropes. When a series is based on tropes, it is doomed. I'm saying it again. A series based on tropes is doomed. One where there are no tropes at all is pretty darn, it has potential. Now, again, I'm not saying that I know what makes a good series or what makes a bad series. What I'm saying is what appeals to me. And what appeals to me is a very well-written, thought-out storyline with characters that develop realistically over time and have genuine relationships. I do not like where you have a character, male most of the time, who has 20 women just ready for him for no reason at all. None. Except that he exists. That's not how the real world works. I mean, technically, if you're like a superstar, I remember during the era of Twilight, like every girl was fawning over freaking Taylor Lautner, or whatever his name is, because he would take his shirt off like every 2 seconds in the movie. And it's like there was Team Edward and Team Jacob. And I'm like, the funny thing is, like, there's a big difference between that and what happens in the series. The main difference is access, proximity. There is a very small chance that anybody is going to have that type of access to Taylor Lautner or whatever his name is. I'm saying it like I know it. I just know his first. I just know Taylor is either first or last name. We'll just call him Jacob because that's what people were fascinated with. People are not going to have access to Jacob. Jacob has his own family and own like relationships and whatnot, and people are not going to be able to convince him to drop all that and engage in a relationship with them solely. Same thing with Edward. That's not going to happen. But in these shows and these animes, it's like, oh, this guy is literally right down the street. I see him walking into the guild all the time. I see this man in the top of the tower every single day. Okay. So the relationship is going to develop differently. But again, you have this one character, like every time I see him, I just want to like literally have sex with him. That makes no sense to me, bro. And when you add that personality to 20 women versus one guy, you're like, okay. Like I think there was one called World's End Harem or something. I didn't really watch it. I just heard a synopsis of it where this guy basically gets cryogenically frozen because there's this really bad disease going around and it's killing all the men. He wakes up and the literal population is nothing but women. And there's this one woman who looks like his childhood friend. And he's like, no, I don't want to have sex with any of you. I want to find my old childhood friend. I know she's alive or whatever. And basically the deal is that she'll help him look for her. But every night she'll send a different woman into his room to try to get him to have sex with him. And I'm like, whose fantasy is this? Ooh. Who sat there and was like, this is what I want to write as a story? My head hurts. But anywho, I think that is good enough for this solo episode. Listeners, if you enjoyed this, again, make sure to follow, like on the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts on this whole, ecchi in anime. Like, is it too much? Is it too little? Like, just let me know what your thoughts are. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope it is not raining like it is here, but enjoy the rest of your day, listeners. Peace out.